right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone who is here today. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. My name is Mari Nemec and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I serve as Advocacy Counsel at the National LGBTQ plus Bar, and I'm so delighted to welcome you to this webinar, Being Who You Are, Where You Want to Be. This webinar was actually the idea of a law student member who requested that we host a panel discussion addressing how LGBTQ plus law students can best discern where to put their professional roots. And I'm so overjoyed that we were able to make this panel a reality with the generosity of our wonderful panelists. So thank you to all of our speakers and thank you to our attendees for making time for this webinar and for the important work that you do locally and nationally. Before we launch the program, I want to put in a quick plug for all of you to join the National LGBTQ plus Bar Association if you're not already a member. Bar membership brings a full year of access to our programming, discounts for our annual conference, and the knowledge that you're helping to support our work. Importantly, law student members of the National LGBTQ plus Bar are also able to register for our Lavender Law Conference and Career Fair for free. Lavender Law is a wonderful opportunity for you to grow your networks, be in community, and can be an extraordinarily helpful place for you to answer some of the questions that you may have about how to navigate your future careers. This year, Lavender Law will be in New York City from July 28th to 30th, and we hope to see you there. You can visit lavenderlaw.org to register. And now I'd like to turn it over to our wonderful moderator for today, Greg Foshheim.
Thanks, Mari. Really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Greg Foshheim. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am a partner in the healthcare practice group of McDermott, Will, and Emery. I am based in Chicago, and my practice focuses on clinical laboratories, clinical research, and kind of the delivery of healthcare after the deal is done. Although I do plenty of transactional work as well. I consider myself to be very much the cleanup crew and answering the hard questions to make sure that providers are able to provide care and that patients are able to access care. Over the past 2 months, my practice has been almost exclusively focused on gender-affirming care as we've been navigating the executive orders that were issued by President Trump attacking the transgender and gender-diverse communities and the ability for individuals under the age of 19 to access care. And it's really been the privilege of my career to be able to be in this position. I started my adult life as a clinical microbiologist at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, and I worked in that position for about 10 years. After pivoting out of that, working in infectious diseases in the Bush administration, I knew that I wanted to stay in healthcare. And so I pivoted to go to Georgia State University and focused on healthcare there. And after a couple of years of practice in Atlanta, I moved to Chicago. So I've made the pivots, I've moved around a little bit, and very happy with how life has kind of unfolded. One more little tidbit about me. I grew up in about as rural of a town in South Dakota as it gets. So you'll kind of hear that from these panelists, how life is, geography is only a suggestion, and you get to practice and live where you may want. So I will play Hollywood squares with the next person on my right, and that's Shauna, if you will introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shauna Baker, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I work for the Cherokee Nation. So I've been practicing a little over 23 years now, and I began my practice here in Tulsa for, in our market, what we consider a large law firm. And after a few years, I wanted to go into the academic arena, and so I basically pursued an LLM at Columbia in order to open up those opportunities. And then after teaching for a few years, I was invited back to Tulsa to do some legal work, and ultimately ended up staying and opening up an estate planning practice. And in 2018, I was first asked by the Cherokee Nation's then Chief, Bill John Baker, to serve on the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court. And I've had the privilege of doing that. My term has just expired, and I have taken my skill set to Cherokee Nation Businesses, which is our economic engine, if you will, for the tribe. And so that's where I'm currently working. So I will pass the baton as well, and I will pass it over to Judge Sabrina McKenna.
Aloha, I'm Sabrina McKenna, and I'm speaking to you from Honolulu, Hawaii. I was born and raised in Japan and spent a little bit of time in the Philippines too as a child. After my dad, who was a US DoD civil service employee, passed away when I was 9, I was raised by my mom as a single naturalized US citizen, Japanese mother. And I came to the University of Hawaii, became an early beneficiary of Title IX, walking on to the University of Hawaii women's basketball team. You know, I'm much older than everybody here. And I went to the University of Hawaii Law School because I knew I wanted to stay in Hawaii. Practiced with what is considered a large firm also in Honolulu, doing insurance defense, civil litigation. Then I had an opportunity to go in-house with a Japanese company, did that for a couple of years, and then decided I wanted to go into public service. My first position was an assistant professor at the local law school, and then I was appointed to the bench in 1993, limited jurisdiction trial court, then general jurisdiction trial court, and I was appointed to the Hawaii Supreme Court in 2011. So I have been here since 2011. Mahalo. Thank you. And I will turn it all over to Kate.
Hi, everybody. I am glad to be with you today. My name is Kate Mozinski. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Associate Director of Legal Operations at Equality Ohio. So a little bit about what I do. I am the career scrappy nonprofit. Equality Ohio, you know, for many of you in other states, you might be familiar with like an Equality Texas, Equality Florida, so on and so forth. All of these Equality Federation members who are all promoting legal and lived equality for LGBTQ plus folks in their state. Equality Ohio is really unique in the fact that we operate a legal clinic within the advocacy organization. Essentially, we are operating a law firm within the larger advocacy organization. And most of my work is focusing in providing free legal services to low and mid-income LGBTQ plus Ohioans. A little bit about me. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. I knew I wanted to do public interest work from the time that I was very, very young. I was that weird person that knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was like 10, and it never changed. So I went to law school at Case Western Reserve University, which is how I wound up in Ohio in the first place. Bounced around, did quite a bit of human rights work abroad, first in East Africa, in refugee law, primarily working with sexual and gender minorities in Kampala, Uganda. Then from there, I was in The Hague working at a war crimes tribunal for a little bit, came back stateside and decided that I needed to actually make a living instead of bouncing from place to place. So I did corporate compliance for 2 years and then quit my job cold turkey with nothing else lined up to go back to public interest work. And then that's what I've been doing ever since. So I've been with Equality Ohio for a little over 5 years now, but we are very unique in the fact that we are an LGBTQ plus focused and LGBTQ plus exclusive legal clinic. And we provide representation in practice areas that disproportionately affect people who are at that comorbidity of living as LGBTQ plus folks and also living in poverty. So the things that you can think where there's a big overlap. So yeah, gender marker corrections, identity documents, health insurance denials for gender affirming care, family law, family protection, family formation, domestic violence issues, things like that. Basically, we kind of looked at what's disproportionately impacting our lower income folks, what's disproportionately impacting our queer folks, made a Venn diagram and learned how to do all the practice areas in the middle. So I will pass it over to Kyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Kyle Velty, and I'm coming to you from Lawrence, Kansas today, where I am a professor at the University of Kansas School of Law. I'm also our Associate Dean for Faculty, and I've been here for 8 years. Prior to coming to KU, I was at the Texas Tech University School of Law in Lubbock for 3 years, and going backwards a little more from there, I spent 16 years in Colorado before I left for Lubbock. I went there right after law school, so I finished law school in 1990. 1999. I went to American University in Washington, D.C., and I knew I wanted to go somewhere with mountains. So I looked at jobs in Vermont and I looked at jobs in Colorado. And I ended up in Colorado clerking for a trial court judge and a state Supreme Court justice. And in between those two clerkships, I went to Harvard and got an LLM because I woke up in my third year of law school and thought, wow, I really like it here. I think I'd like to teach. And that's kind of, unless you go to a T14 school, that's kind of a too late thought to have. And so I got some great mentoring about going to get an LLM from Yale, Harvard, or Stanford, and was lucky enough to get into Harvard. But didn't go into teaching until well after that. I practiced for 9 years in Colorado at a law firm, a regional law firm that did complex commercial litigation, and did some adjuncting while I was there at the University of Denver, and made the jump from practice to the academy by entering as a long-term contract faculty member at the University of Denver Stern College of Law in their legal externship program. And so I was there for 3 years. It was a great fit because I'd practiced in Denver for all those years and was able to go and help students find externship placements in the Denver and larger Colorado communities. So my scholarship and research focuses on LGBTQ civil rights. For many years, in my early years, I focused on family formation and well before same-sex marriage was even available, or second-parent adoptions, and that's shifted over time, obviously, as the issues facing our communities have changed. And more recently, I'm spending a lot more time writing about white Christian nationalism as a political movement and the connections between queer rights, racial rights, and gender rights under this umbrella of thinking about it through white Christian nationalism. So I'll stop there and turn it over to, I think, Greg, and we'll take it from here.
Very much. As I mentioned when we were having our planning call, I am certainly the least interesting person on this call. It's just a fascinating background that you all bring, and I'm just curious if we could start with when you were first contemplating law school. Did you have a goal in mind as to whether Kate, you mentioned that you always wanted to be a public interest lawyer. Was that from childhood? Did you sway from that plan? And if you could just kind of address how did you craft your law school journey to get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's no one right way to do it. I think is my first reaction to this. So for me, I always knew that I cared a lot about social justice. I was the kid on the playground that would get very upset when someone wouldn't like share the swing with someone else. I always cared about it a lot, disproportionately. Um, it wasn't really until I was in high school that I was like, okay, I know I absolutely want to be an attorney. And that was really because I started doing competitive debate. I debated all 4 years of high school to this day. I'm not going to say how many years, but many, many years later, I still coach a high school debate team on the weekends. They're great. But for me, the way that I kind of crafted what I wanted to do in law school is there's so many different ways to be a public interest attorney, right? You can be public interest on the direct services side of the world, like what I'm doing now. You can be public interest in working on the policy side, public interest working on the research side of the world. So when I was in law school, I tried to take internship and externship opportunities that would put me in all those different areas of public interest law. So I worked at the International Bar Association and their Human Rights Institute, writing knock it off letters and policy memorandum. When I was out of law school, I did that work in Uganda, which was direct legal services in a really, really high energy environment where you're seeing, 40 clients a day as they come through. And I really just kind of wanted to figure out like, what is it in public interest that resonates with me and my skill set. And I found that I loved doing the direct service. I liked being able to sit directly across from my client. And even if it's accomplishing a small legal thing, it's a really, really big legal thing for them. So for me, that's how I decided, okay, I want to do something that's public interest focused. Maybe legal aid is right. And then I came out a little bit later in life, at least publicly. And then when that happened, I was just like, I want to do public interest, but I want to do it in a way that it is serving my community. And Equality Ohio was already in the process of developing a legal clinic back in 2019 when I first came on board. And it just lined up perfectly. At the time, I was teaching at Case Western in the human trafficking clinic as a law professor, doing direct services there, working with law students. But I think that the most important thing for me was just kind of getting a taste of all the different things in order to figure out what most aligned with what I wanted to do with my skill set and what filled my cup as an attorney. So, because like a lot of people say, I want to go into public interest, but that's such a diverse array of things that you can do while being in public interest.
Similar question for you, Kyle. You said that you knew it during 3L that you wanted to become a professor, but it took several years to make that jump. What did that process look like, and did your goal change along the way? And if you can just kind of talk through that thinking as a young adult versus a more seasoned adult when you made the move.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, as I mentioned, getting into law teaching is it is a journey. And it reflects a lot of I think the underbelly of our profession, which tends to go elitist and hierarchical, and where did you go to law school? And not all of our professions that way, but the legal academy in particular puts a lot of weight on one's pedigree and where you went to law school, and it's difficult to break in if you didn't go to a T14 law school. So I was lucky to have the mentors at American who helped guide me. And my short-term plan was to, clerk, get the LLM, and practice for like just a couple years to pay down my debt, and then go on the teaching market. And it looks way different in hindsight than it did when I had a plan. And I think so. One major piece of advice I would share is be open to a very meandering journey. And mine has been very meandering. I ended up at a law firm saying I'll be here 2 years, but I was there 9 years because I liked it way more than I thought I would. The work was really interesting. It wasn't cookie cutter. We had kind of bet the company kind of litigation at this firm, so we had clients with great resources. So it wasn't like here you're doing insurance defense, you have 7 minutes for each file. No, it was we have a huge case with lots of stakes. Go down any kind of rabbit hole you need to do the research you want to do. So I stayed very kind of the intellectual curiosity in me, the lifelong learner in me, was able to really take a lot of satisfaction from that work for a very, very long time. But in that gap of 9 years, I did not write one article, and that's really the currency of the teaching market. So I had a list of ideas next to my computer about law review articles I wanted to write, and like just never got to them because I was a litigator and I had 2 kids during that time as well. So that's why I adjunct. I turned 40 that year that I adjunct, and I thought I really love this, and I had this recollection that I really want to be professor one day. And I'm 40. I love this position. I love teaching. And about 6 months after I finished teaching my adjunct course at DU, the externship program opened up, the position in there. And so I thought, Velty, you're 40, you got a couple young kids, like it's time to, whatever the metaphor you want to use, right? Fish or cut bait on whether you want to try to do this teaching thing. So I left the law firm and took a 70% pay cut. Extremely scary to do that. And it gave me the time to write, right? It was not tenure track. It wasn't guaranteed to be tenure track. I could have been a long-term contract person at that salary forever. But what I knew is that I would enjoy it, and I would have time to write, and was able to do that, right? To write my way out of DU into a VAP, a visiting assistant professor at Texas Tech. And we can talk about my decision to move my kids from Lubbock as a lesbian, a single mom by choice, down to Lubbock, Texas later on, if anyone's interested. And that it just set the path. So yeah, it's very, very different than I ever imagined. And just real quickly, I'll tell you, I went to law school. I was working in DC at a nonprofit, the National Organization for Women, as an activist and organizer for a couple of years, right out of college. Didn't even think I wanted to go to law school. Thought I wanted to get a PhD in women's studies and teach at Vassar. That's what I wanted to do. But I went to the Supreme Court in the fall of 1995, and I saw Romer versus Evans argued at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I was the last, our group was the last group to get in to the court, and because it was a long line. We spent the night on the steps to get in. And I saw Jean Dubofsky argue that case. And I said, that is what I want to do. I literally marched from the steps of the Supreme Court back to my DC office and registered for the LSAT. And this is what I want to do. So from that moment, I knew that I wanted to do something with queer rights, and it's looked different along the way. But I'll stop there for now, and we can pick up on any of those threads later on that folks are interested in.
Fantastic. Justice McKenna, did you anticipate that the judiciary was going to be an eventual position for you, and or how did that evolve? What decisions did you make along the way to stay in Hawaii, stay in law firms for a long time, and then move to the courts?
Right. So I came to Hawaii from Japan, and during law school, Japanese is my first language. So my 1L summer, I did intern with a major American US-based law firm in Tokyo. But I decided that I was not going to practice as a foreign lawyer in Japan because as a woman, it's still not good in Japan. And I decided I wanted to stay in Hawaii because of my mixed ethnic background. I just kind of fit into Hawaii, so I was very comfortable here. So I decided to stay. When I was in law school, I wasn't thinking I wanted to become a judge. When I was a 1L, one of my adjunct professors was appointed to the bench, and I thought, oh my God, lawyers become judges. Well, maybe that's something I could aspire to someday, but it's not like I planned my career to become a judge. So, I was insurance defense, and then I went in-house, which is not a way to get to a judgeship. But when I quit, when I decided to resign my in-house position, I thought I want to use my skill set to go into some sort of public service. I applied to be a judge also. First time I applied, I didn't get it. But I got the assistant professorship at the law school. And the second time I applied 2.5 years later, I made the list and I was selected. So, and when I joined this court, that adjunct professor from law school, I joined him on this court. So it was just, you just never know where life is going to take you. And I had a lot of opportunities because Japanese is my first language. I had a lot of headhunters contacting me from the mainland, big markets, asking me to move. And I said, there's no way I'm staying in Hawaii. I just love it here. So, yeah.
Shauna, Justice McKenna said something kind of poignant, that you never know where life is going to take you. Curious if you can address kind of that process of moving jurisdictions. Does a person need to stay where they were baked, or have you been able to move jurisdictions in your career?
I think the presumption is that for many law schools, that wherever you attend school, at least the state, if not the city, that you're somewhat confined. And I think that's a myth that, we're knocking holes in more and more every day. But I think historically speaking, it was probably correct. I think, one of the best pieces of advice that I could give a law school student, especially, I think many of us love our books, and that's why we go to school, right? We love to study and we love to read, and so we're perhaps not the most social people, generally speaking. And I think networking is really hard. And I think if there's one skill set that I could go back and sort of teach my younger self, or encourage my younger self to develop, it would be networking. And so I think that couple of wonderful advancements, and that's like the uniform bar exam. Back when I graduated law school, each state had their own unique bar exam. You needed to, there were conflicts on the days that you could set. We look at things like reciprocity. What states or like the District of Columbia can I receive reciprocity in and then move? And so it was more difficult, I think, for attorneys of past generations to move than it is today. And I also think that there's just a little bit of fear, right? There's always fear in the unknown. And I think that holds us back. So I think one of sort of the great things that came out of COVID was remote working, looking to things online for job placements. People were looking to move. There are cities now that offer opportunities for people to, I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there's an opportunity where people can move to Tulsa. And if they stay here a couple of years, they get a $10,000 grant that they can use for housing and other things. And so there are these incentives, right, that are being offered, and they're encouraging people to move. So for me personally, I moved from Tulsa to New York to attend school. Much like Kyle did, I graduated from the University of Tulsa's law school and needed to, as I say, launder my JD degree in order to go into the academic arena. And then I moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and that was a big change. And, moving into sort of the legal work aspect of it, the academic aspect wasn't difficult at all, but it was sort of the moving into Florida, into a new city, into a new place where I didn't have any family or friends or connections. I think that was really the more difficult challenge. And then ultimately moved back home. But again, I think there's so many opportunities out there today that make it easier to move. And so I think that's an old myth, and I'm glad that we're able to start busting in it a little bit.
You to weigh in on that a little bit as well. We have represented on the panel Tulsa and Cleveland and Lawrence and Hawaii, and Honolulu. So four jurisdictions that are kind of little micro blue bubbles in some otherwise challenging, well, maybe not Hawaii, but in otherwise more challenging jurisdictions. Have you found it a difficult transition to be working in a state that may not necessarily recognize or appreciate the full array of your rainbow of talents? I'll start with Justice McKenna.
Fortunately, I am in Hawaii. The first, in 1993, one of the reasons I really wanted to become a judge the second time I applied is because this court was the first court in the world to rule that denial of same-sex marriage was unconstitutional based on the state constitution. So remember the importance of state constitutions, especially now. I've been very, very fortunate to be in Hawaii. And, I've only really felt comfortable coming out at work in 1991 when Hawaii became the third state in the country to outlaw LGBTQ. Well, it was originally only lesbian and gay employment discrimination. So that made me really comfortable coming out at work. But so the law matters, and Hawaii is a great place, I believe, for the LGBTQ plus population.
You've touched DC and Denver and Lubbock and Lawrence, so you've seen an array. Curious if you can address that from your experience.
Yeah, it has been really different in each jurisdiction. With Colorado being, very, very progressive, and having shield laws at this point to say, yes, kids can come here who are trans and get the gender affirming care. We're going to protect the kids. We're going to protect the doctors. And like I mentioned, I was a single mom by choice. My kids have an anonymous sperm donor. I had them on my own when I was at the law firm. I didn't have a partner at the time. And they were 6 and 9 when I decided to move to Lubbock. And all my friends and family were looking at me like, "Are you nuts?" Right? I mean, it's not Austin, right? It's Lubbock, West Texas. And I spent time there on my interview and my callback, and I really, really liked the community. The one thing I made sure of was that the university policy itself had a non-discrimination protection for me. So I knew the state didn't and never would. I knew Lubbock didn't and probably wouldn't, but I needed to know that I would be protected in my employment. And I was so surprised. The move to Lubbock was such a good lesson for me and my children that people matter more than place. It was a fantastic 3 years. The community of Texas Tech is extremely progressive. There's like a square mile in Lubbock where Texas Tech sits, and they're an R1 research institution, right? I mean, so it is a very high caliber institution with folks from all over the world and all sorts of departments. They had openly trans employees who they supported through that transition on the job. So the lesson for me was, again, people are more important than place, but also that you can find like-minded people, right, in all kinds of institutions. You can find supportive people, and it's about that, to not make assumptions and rule out opportunities, because it's Lubbock, Texas, and we still go back and visit. We had such a wonderful time down there. So stay open to those things. And the other advantage of being in a place like Lubbock, at least for me and professionally and personally, is super small and easy to get around, low cost of living. My kids walk to school every morning. I could walk to Texas Tech. Just those kind of quality of life things can actually make a big difference. But also, I was a really big fish in a very small pond in my subject area, right? There weren't a lot of professors who were expert on sex discrimination, and particularly LGBTQ discrimination. So anytime anything came up and the media needed to talk to somebody on any issue touching the queer community, I was in one of the local news or interviewed on the local radio or in print. Even if it was like the Title IX scandal with the football coach at Baylor, right, which is a little bit adjacent to what I do, but I could get up to speed on that in time to have an interview. So you might have opportunities in spaces or places like that that are smaller to really shine. And I was able to develop things like public speaking and media skills and things that I would have never had in Denver, where there's, a dime a dozen in terms of LGBTQ lawyers and experts in those areas.
I've found the same. You may not think of Big Law as having all that many opportunities for LGBTQ advocacy, but the past 2, 3 months have been ripe with that. Many hospitals and health systems have really appreciated that I, as a out gay male, speaks fluent gender affirming care and can train people in how to have hard conversations about topics that aren't necessarily part of every cis hetero person's day-to-day conversation. So I agree with that entirely. Shauna, your experience is one that not many law students have, and that being working in the tribal courts. Can you address that experience, at being out in that experience, and also just the difference between small town, well, I guess Tulsa isn't small town, but more of a rural environment in private practice and in tribal practice?
Yeah, so the state of Oklahoma, just from a political landscape environment, just to kind of orient everyone, we are the only state in the union in the last 2 presidential elections where every county in the state has voted red. And it doesn't matter what you think about that, but it's just a fact. And so we're a very conservative state. We tend to think of ourselves as being part of the South. We tend to be very evangelical. So being out here in the state of Oklahoma is a very difficult thing for most people. I came out while I was in law school. And before I took a job, again, in most markets would be a relatively small to medium-sized firm, but for here, a larger size firm for our market. I actually came out to the partners, but I chose the firm that I was going to work at for my summer internship based on the fact that they had an out gay man as a partner. And I thought, if they can have an out gay man that makes partner, they're going to be fine with a lesbian woman, right? I just thought it'll be okay. But I did come out to them before I actually accepted the job, just to double check, if you will. But in Oklahoma, I was raised in a very, very small town, very rural, grew up on a farm. I was the first in my family to go to undergrad or graduate school. And the tribe itself, so I'm both Cherokee and Creek, but the Cherokee Nation's reservation is where I grew up. And a wonderful experience in that way, being sort of reared by a community, if you will. But coming back to the tribe's headquarters is in a town that's quite small compared to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which again is small when you compare it to New York or Chicago or places like that. So again, it's much more rural. And when it came time to be on the court, one of the conversations that I had with the chief was, I'm out. And it takes 5 seconds to Google me, and everybody's going to know if they don't already know. I mean, it's not a secret. It hasn't been a secret, and I've been very active and I've been very vocal. So, this is going to be a challenge, again, in a more rural, more evangelical environment when we need not just the nomination of the chief, but the confirmation of council. It's going to be a challenge, and it was. My first vote going up to be on the court. I made it out of committee, but I didn't make it through the tribal council process. They basically sent me back to committee for further consideration, which was a kind death. I then went on to serve on our gaming commission, which oversees our casinos for a while. And then we had another justice that unfortunately their seat became available because they passed away. And so I was nominated to fill the remainder of their term. And by that point in time, people had really had an opportunity to get to know me as a person, and they could see me as a person versus seeing me as just the lesbian person or the gay person, right? Which is how a lot of people saw me initially. And so just getting in there every single day and being hands-on is really valuable. And I will follow that up with saying, when I was working for that firm here in Tulsa, the larger firm, when I first came out of law school and graduated, I had been working there about 2 years, and we had a secretarial pool swap, if you will. So in this particular firm, every secretary had one partner and one associate. And so they moved associates for some reason. And the secretary that I was newly assigned came to my office and said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I can't work for you. I feel like you're the way that the devil's coming into my life, and I'm just not going to have it." And so we talked. It took about 30 minutes, but she said over and over, "I see you as the devil and how the devil's coming in my life. And I'm just basically telling you that now." And I said, "Okay, I understand. My family is Assembly of God, which is very uh, right on the Pentecostal scale and the evangelical scale." So I'm like, "I get you." And so I went to the chair of the committee and I asked the chair if they would just simply switch me back to my former secretary and allow that associate to take my place with the new secretary. And if we could make that switch, that would be wonderful. This was a Friday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the partner that I shared that with had a booming voice, and he stood up and he said, "You have got to be kidding me." And he walked out in the hallway, and in the sort of middle of the firm, it's all cubbies for the secretaries and so forth. And he says, "Is it true that you said this?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, let me tell you something. I want you to go home this weekend. I want you to have a conversation with God. And if God tells you you can't work for Shauna, do not come back to work on Monday, and we will have your personal effects sent to your house. But if you can work for Shauna, we would love to see you at 8 a.m. And she came back on Monday and she worked for me, and we never had a problem. But, that's allyship. And, I was willing to bend to make her comfortable, but I had someone that was cisgendered that was an ally who stood up for me in that moment and stood up for all of us in that moment and basically said, "We need you to behave, rise your professionalism. We need you to rise to the level of the professionalism we expect in this office. And if you can do that, great." And so, it's just one of those things that I think after that moment in time, I decided that I needed to advocate for myself as well. And so I'm just unapologetically out now.
Speaking of advocacy, turning to Kate, you mentioned when you that you were a bit later in life when you came out, and now you are now you are front and center for Equality Ohio. Has that been a challenging process to be so out and to be the face of a fairly hostile state to LGBTQ individuals?
I love it. Not because I'm a person that's comfortable being in the spotlight. I fake extroversion fairly well, but after I see people, all I want is my cat and plants for a while. Any of the number of cats, because we're a queer household, so there are multiples. But I think that there's a really unique challenge in being, an openly out, an openly non-binary out attorney in a hostile jurisdiction. I think that a lot of times people make this assumption that when you're doing legal aid work, the everyday lawyerings, the everyday divorce, that there's not the same like intellectual rigor that you would get practicing in appellate law, for example. That's not true when you're in a hostile jurisdiction. When you are in a hostile jurisdiction, you get all of the intellectual rigor and all of the strategy conversations about things that might be relatively easy in a more friendly jurisdiction. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that comes specifically from being in these circumstances, both opportunities for, making real change, but also a lot of opportunities for very creative lawyering. For example, we've had a lot of cases where we've been successful in arguing that a minor child's existence as a trans person in this state is sufficient reason for a public policy interest to seal a court record, because that in itself is putting the minor child at risk, right? You can make creative legal arguments. You can do that in a lot of unique ways. In terms of my own personal experience, so I had been out in my community, with my wife, obviously, with my wife. And it was actually my wife and I started dating before they transitioned as well. I'd been out in my community. I'd been out with, my friends. I hadn't been out with my family. And my family, conservative Catholic. I was raised in, right outside of Dallas, Texas. I in a very, very conservative environment. And the way that I came out to my dad was I said, "Oh, I'm working at Equality Ohio," and my dad was joking with me as dads do and said, "Oh, what are you the token cisgender straight person?" And I just said, "Nope." And that's how I came out to my father. A few years later, we're good now. We're good now. But I think that one thing that I am aware of, is even though as a non-binary person, it can be scary sometimes, knowing that if somebody wants to like find my face in the state of Ohio because they just want to do something horrible to like gender minority communities or NB folks or folks who are openly in support of trans rights or whatever, they can find me very easily. But at the same time, I think that one of the reasons that I'm here in Ohio doing this work is because I have a buffer of privilege that helps, people who might not listen to my clients will listen to me because I happen to have a JD behind my name, right? So I think that I'm in a position of a lot of privilege by being a person who benefits from tools of white supremacy as a white presenting person. I am cis passing if I want to be. I have a lot of privilege that attaches with my identity, my educational privilege, right? So I think that I'm in a really unique position in this hostile jurisdiction right now. To help amplify the voices of other folks in the community who might not be listened to. But if it comes through the filter of partnership with me, it's more likely that those folks' voices can be placed front and center in the way that they're supposed to. So I view like my role as an attorney is yes, to advocate for my clients, but never in a way that is speaking over them. It's to utilize my privilege in a way to amplify the voices of individuals who might not otherwise be listened to in this jurisdiction. And just to kind of like put that in context so it sounds a little less theoretical. When I first started doing this job back in 2019, I remember going into a rural court for a simple legal name change in Ohio, because I don't just cover Cleveland, we cover statewide. So I'm in courts all over the place. I don't have a home base, don't have a home base court. I'm in a new court every other week. And you figure out what you're doing when you get there. There was this court, mid-sized city, a simple adult name change, and my client was asked the most horrendous, invasive, improper questions about their transition status, mental health care, so on and so forth, for a simple legal name change. And none of this was relevant. So I was objecting all the time on the record, just going to get all those objections down. Eventually, the name change was granted, and I kept going to that court. And I kept going to that court with trans people, kept going to that court for legal name changes. I kept on objecting on the record every single time. And now, 5 years later, that court is now no issue for somebody to go and do it pro se. And the court has a little piece of paper that they give you after a name change that just says transgender name change at the top of it and has brief advice instructions for how to correct all the rest of your remaining Ohio identity documents. Showing up in spaces like that matters. Showing up consistently, showing up repeatedly matters. And even in the current climate that we're in, it still gets things done. So I am, I'm not always comfortable being like visibly at the center of, of an org like this. I love what I do. Being in the spotlight is never something that's particularly comfortable for me. But what motivates me to do it is that, you have those moments. I got a Christmas card last year of a picture of a really wonderful lesbian couple. We don't have second parent adoption here in Ohio. So I got to get really, really creative with familial protections. And sometimes you can do them as a step parent adoption if you can convince the judge that that's doable. Or the other thing I'll do is I will get an order from the probate court saying the adoption is unnecessary because parentage is presumed. And that's a portable order from the court that parentage is presumed, parentage established, good enough.
Yeah.
So like you can get really creative with stuff. But, I've got a Christmas card in my desk of these two moms and their baby. And they sent me a Christmas card every year saying, thanks for helping protect our family. And for me, that makes it worth it. That always makes it worth it.
So much of our profession does focus, or we pause on that. This is what makes it worth it, and part of that does stem to choosing the right area of law, choosing the type of things that impassion us. The five of you, including Mari, have some of the dream jobs in this profession, and I'm curious if you have some advice to the law students who are listening. How do you choose the area of law that you want to focus in? What are some early steps that you can take? And I'll also invite any of the attendees to add questions into the chat if you can, and we're happy to address those as well. So I'll start with you, Kyle, since you have direct interaction with law students on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think, some people have a really solid idea of what they want to do, and often, will end up seeing that through and having a really happy career. But I encourage even those kinds of folks who come in as 1Ls and say, I'm here for this reason, and this is my course, and this is my plan. I encourage even those folks to take a lot of different kinds of courses. Don't take a course just because it's on the bar exam. That's what bar prep is for. And you get the same toolbox of legal tools and analysis and reading and research in any doctrinal class. So you don't you get what you need, and you can take classes that really gonna light your intellectual fire, kind of thing. So choose
Mhm.
classes that really will interest you. I also tell students, especially ones that don't know what they want to do, get out of the building as much as you can. Do externships, volunteer, pro bono, clinical work, as much as you can get out. And some schools have more opportunities for that than others, but experiential learning, I think, is really, really important. And then I also would encourage folks to really get to know their faculty. And even if you don't have a question about the class content, go to those office hours, reach out, say, tell me about your path, tell me about your journey, and learn about other people's, how they found their passion and their purpose. I feel like I've landed exactly where I want to be. I am so lucky to have this job that doesn't feel like work to me, and I hope that for every aspiring lawyer to do that. So cast a wide net, have a lot of experiences early on, get to know a lot of people, and get out into the community. Right, join the bar. There's often a student division of every bar association that's free or cheap. Go to the events, start to meet people. Not because I'm here to want a job. I hate networking. I don't want to do that, but literally be curious about people and their paths. And ask questions and build those relationships. So that would be my advice.
Thoughts from you, Justice McKenna?
Yeah, no, I think that was just wonderful, great advice. And I guess, I didn't know what I wanted to do in law school. And candidly, my first thought was I was going to be a legal aid lawyer. But then I found out that at that time in Hawaii, legal aid lawyers, this is in 1980, 81, was getting paid $13,000 a year. And I thought that I needed to support my mom. I found out later that she didn't really need me to support her, but I thought I needed to support her. That's why I went into what is now relatively a big law firm here in Hawaii. And some of the work I did, I liked. Some of the work I didn't like. And so that's when I had the opportunity to go in-house. I decided to try something different. But the other thing that I would say is no matter where you are, consider also pro bono work. Because one of the things I did was I was able to convince my law firm. I served on the pro bono legal organization for referral service in Hawaii. And I was able to convince my firm to give 50 hours of billable hour credit for the pro bono work that we did. And so some of my most memorable cases were the pro bono cases that I took. And so, it just really opened my mind to different areas of the law. So don't think that you're stuck doing what you started with. If you don't like it, try something else and move on. That's the beauty of a law degree. And if you don't like where you are, move. I have a son who's a lawyer. He just 6 months ago, he moved from New York to San Francisco, and he really enjoys being in San Francisco. So, you can move, you can go to different places, you can try different things. You're getting a law degree, one of the best degrees you could ever get. Use it.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, Shauna. Whether it's advice that you would give to a law student searching for things, or the best advice that you received as a law student.
No, I think one of the most important things, like you said, we all sort of have our dream jobs, and we're living them every day, and we found something that we're passionate about. Gets us up in the morning, and we're happy and eager to go to work, and it's helped propel us throughout the course of our careers. One of the things I think is very important, back to advice I could give my younger self, is making sure that we take care of ourselves. And one of the ways that I particularly do that is I spend a lot of time outdoors, in training. I partake in a lot of marathons and Ironman triathlons, and so I get to have the opportunity to spend time with friends while I'm training, but I get to exercise physically, and I get to also sort of have that time where, my brain is not thinking about cases, but it kind of gets a chance to rest and meditate a little bit. And so I think that, being passionate about the law is wonderful, but also find those other things that fill you, that lift you up and can provide you with a little bit of energy and sort of pep in your step, if you will, that can sustain you, whether it be family, friends, whether it be some sort of, your, religion and spiritual quest, or, be some sort of athletic pursuits or whatever it may be. But, just, don't shut out the rest of the world, find it. And all those vacation days that you're offered, take them, right? Like, go travel, see the world, or do whatever it is. If it's just going home and getting in your pajamas and watching Netflix, whatever it is that, charges you and recharges you, take those vacation days and use them.
Kate, the inverse of that, or the corollary, you always knew what you wanted to do. So what are some steps that a law student can take to ensure that they stay on the path that led them to law school?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I worked backwards. I knew what I wanted to do, and then I figured out what practice areas. I knew that I wanted to go help the queer community, and then I learned my practice areas based on what the queer community locally told me they needed. So I had no idea that I was ever going to litigate a divorce until I was just like, oh, people need this. Guess I'm learning this practice area. Let me build the plane as I fly it. When I first started this job, I had never done a criminal record sealing, and I was like, oh, well, this is going to benefit the community. Guess I'm learning this area of practice. So my advice is really to be brave. It takes a lot to walk into a court that you've never been in before with law that you don't feel that familiar with. But preparation is really key. And it is amazing how far the dedication and preparation will get you, even if you're doing something for the first time. And I think for any law student, I'm going to tell you a secret, and that is that I get scared before I walk into a courtroom, no matter how many times I've walked into a courtroom. I get scared before I'm making a closing statement, before every closing statement, whether it was my first one or my 500th one. It never goes away. You just get better at hiding it. But I think a lot of it just comes down to being brave. Don't be afraid to try new things. And ultimately, and I know this sounds cliched, but sometimes you do kind of have to throw it up to the universe. I mean, the journey is not linear. I don't think it has been for anybody on this call, certainly not for me. But whatever I do, interviews or panels or anything, like specifically working with law students, one thing that I always say is, I assume if you've made it to law school and you're pursuing your JD, you're smart. I can teach you things. I can't teach you to be principled. I can't teach you to be passionate. I can teach you the law. So the most important things, in my opinion, as you begin your career journey, whether it's going into nonprofit or going into big law, is to really to center those principles for yourself that you are capable, you are intelligent, you can learn the things, and you're courageous, and you can try new things, and it's going to be okay. We all mess up. We all mess up. It happens to everybody. There are so many cases where I like look back on and I'm like, oh, I would have done this differently if I did it again, right? And that's normal. That's normal. But yeah, I think that a lot of it is figuring out what lights your fire. What do you care about? What do you want to be doing? What motivated you to go to law school? And if you allow that to kind of be your guiding center, eventually you're going to wind up where you want to be. And I think that's what I would tell any law student.
I knew I wanted to be a healthcare lawyer, but I didn't know what that meant. So I hung out at court a lot and learned what it wasn't. It wasn't an IP lawyer. Sitting in a Markman hearing made me want to claw my eyes out. But in doing that, I heard one of my best turns of phrase that I use on almost every this is not like this, and it was, Your Honor, what we're doing here is we're arguing about the difference between apples and fried chicken. And it was just hearing a DA act on her feet was so educational for me. So to Kyle's point, getting out of the classroom, getting out of the books and into the discipline of law was one of my greatest lessons. We have about 4 minutes left and want to invite each one of you to just share some final thoughts. So we'll play Hollywood Squares again, but what would you love for what would you love for the law students to have resonating in their brains as we say goodbye? I'll start with Kate.
Oh gosh, let me come up with something profound. Um, I think what I would hope like resonates with you all is what a time to be a queer identified attorney. Both in like the wow, things are a little bit on fire right now, without getting super political, but also anytime that things are on fire, there's so much opportunity. And I think that sometimes it's a little bit of a rebrand, right? For me, the way that able to continue to do this work without burning out is every time that another challenge is thrown, and a court says, oh, nope, you can't do that. I'm like, okay, well, I've got a different hand in poker. Let me figure out how to play this one, right? So I think that anytime that there is challenge, there's also opportunity. And that opportunity comes from being consistently brave, being creative. And I think that, we're at a really important time right now, as a community, as advocates. I guess again, like what a time to be alive and lawyering, where we're at right now. So I would just encourage you all. Law school can be intimidating. The practice of law can be intimidating, but you don't need to be intimidated. I think that you are pursuing the skills that you need, in order to pursue the career that you want, regardless of where that is. But I think that particularly now, visibility is so important. So I encourage you all, obviously, that's a personal journey for everyone, but I could not be happier that I am an out non-binary attorney serving my community in rural Ohio. I love it. So I just encourage you, let your passion be your guide, because it'll take you where you want to be.
Justice McKenna.
Thanks. I just returned from San Francisco where I gave the keynote at the Asian American Bar Association of the Greater Bay Area. They have the second LGBTQ president, the first lesbian, and the theme was Rainbow Road. Rainbow Road taken from also the Mario Brothers game, apparently, which is a very long and arduous road. But let me tell you, I graduated from law school in 1982. My Rainbow Road has been meandering, and we are in a terrible time right now. But what I said there is that my life experience is that the battle for civil rights is 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. We are in a 2 steps back period, but we are so far ahead of where I was in 1982 when I graduated from law school. Never forget that. Keep fighting and speak up. Thank you.
Did you call on Shauna or Kyle? I couldn't
I
quite
called
hear.
on Shauna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think the first thing that I would say is, again, just every day be yourself and be the best version of yourself. And I know sometimes that's hard, but when you can be out in your community and you can just show up and you can be you and do you, again, it helps our cause as a collective group each and every day, because then people know someone who's out, right? And then it humanizes us as a group. And it makes it less, I think, it makes it more difficult to discriminate against us when people can say, "Oh, I know somebody that will be directly impacted by this bill or this law or whatever it may be." Also, I would say that if you have the opportunity, and I know that financially it can be difficult when you're in law school, but if you can make it to Lavender Law, I really want to encourage you to go. It's a great time to be surrounded by your Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus peers, but also there are tons of practitioners and judges, and we're there, and it's a great time to not only meet people who you're going to potentially be going to work with as cohorts, but also it's an opportunity to meet mentors, right? And there's a wonderful career fair, so you will actually see companies and nonprofits and all sorts of employers, whether it's government or whatever, the private sector, from all over the country. And so it's a really great opportunity just to sort of see what all of your options are. And I think that can be profoundly moving to know what is possible. And so I think that if you can attend, do attend. It's going to be in New York this year at the end of July, and it will be a really, really wonderful opportunity. So thank you.
And because I'm still afraid of law school professors, I will give Kyle the last word.
Thank you. And I'll be brief because I know we're at time, but I just want to make, I think, 3 quick points. One, I co-sign on everything that my co-panelists just said. The pendulum will swim again. It will swing again, right? It's swung against justice and equality right now. It will swing the other way. But that goes to my second point, which is you belong here and we need you here now. No matter what messages you're getting from any level of government or individuals, you belong here. You have value, and we need you to come up alongside of us and do the work. And the last thing I'll say is I think because of COVID and after COVID, it's really hard for us to build community. I mean, there's just a reluctance, or it's harder than it was before COVID. So I want to personally offer to anyone who views this, if you want to reach out to me on email, you can find me on the KU Law website. And I think we're going to push this pendulum back to the other side of equality and liberty and justice if we start to build these communities together again. So, reach out to folks. We do want to talk with you, and we do want to mentor you, and we do want to learn from you.
You co-sign on all of that. So thank you to the panelists for sharing your time and wisdom and expertise. And I will turn it over to Mari for some closing thoughts.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My computer freaked out a bit there again, but thank you all so much. This was so wonderful. I'll just say, even from the perspective of somebody who graduated from law school just a few years ago, this was the boost that I needed today. So thank you to you all. And I'll just reiterate that you can find so much more of this wonderful advice and community and hope, honestly, at Lavender Law this summer, just like Shauna shared, and we would love to have you there. So you can find all that information on our website. You're always welcome to reach out to folks at the LGBTQ plus bar. All of our emails are up there as well. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists. I hope that everybody has a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope that you get some good news this week.